So I think we can all agree the Victorians were into some pretty weird shit. Hey guys, it's Emma here and welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be delving into Victorian corpse photography. I actually look pretty Victorian myself, don't I? Maybe not the makeup, I don't know. So yeah, Victorian corpse photography. As you do. So over the past few years there has been this internet craze of the Victorian standing corpse, where they claim that the subjects in these perfectly ordinary photographs are actually dead. In these photographs, the corpses are posed to look very much alive. Sometimes stood next to them are the family members, siblings, mothers. These blogs claim that the corpses were propped up with special stands and straps. Some photographers even painted the eyelids so that they looked like open, staring eyes. Other times, what may look like an ordinary family portrait actually features one or several dead family members. Suddenly, the readers of these blogs turn it into a game, spot the dead child. Maybe we shouldn't break that out at parties. It is widely known that the Victorians had a very strange relationship with death, and a morbid fascination with what lay beyond the grave. So I thought I would clear up a few things after doing a lot of research and separating the fact from the fiction. I'm aware that I'm about to shit on every student's presentation on Victorian death photography, but here we go. Alas, dear children, Victorian standing corpse photography is in fact a myth. I know, I'm sorry, I know, but come on. First of all, the physics of it. Have you ever tried lifting, moving and posing a corpse? I mean, I haven't personally, but I imagine it would go about as well as this. Yeah, those flimsy straps and stands and mechanisms cannot hold all of that dead weight. It's just not possible. Second, you have to take into account the stages of decay after death. Some of these can happen very quickly. And I don't mean full-on decay, I mean things like rigor mortis, which can set in 2 to 6 hours after death. You've also got to take into account certain leakages. Even something as simple as closing a person's mouth is a huge ordeal. Those mouths don't close by themselves. But what about the corpse holding mechanism, you might ask? Well, that was actually used to keep a living person in place, as some exposures could take up to a minute, and let's be honest, it is really hard to keep that still. I can't keep that still talking throughout this video. There are even what you could call very early behind the scenes photographs showing very much alive people being posed with these mechanisms. And correct me if I'm wrong, but dead people don't talk and interact with their photographers. The Victorians were innovative people, but you can't make somebody look that alive, and I doubt we could achieve the same results today. Even with our technology today, this just wouldn't be possible. So many of these sites claim that these posing stands were used to make dead people appear like dolls or mannequins, just posing them to the photographer's will. But this just isn't true. There are no records or photographs of a photographer posing a dead person in this manner. But what about the vacant 1,000-yard stare? Well, don't forget they were sitting there for about a minute, and also you have to take into account the fact that the subject is blinking, as it's natural to blink. Around the late 1830s to 1840s, early cameras meant that exposures for portraiture were about a minute and a half. But due to advancing technology, these exposures were reduced to about 8 to 10 seconds. So the pictures you see of people being propped up with stands and back supports and neck braces are from very early on. You also have to take into account the chemical processes used to develop these images. Some of the chemicals in this early developing process could blow out the highlights in the eyes. So, for example, a living person's eyes would appear more white or slightly cloudy. And as for very small children being photographed and these websites claiming that they're dead, please don't assume that a child with their eyes closed in a Victorian photograph is dead. They're sleeping because they're children. Also, sometimes the photographer would give a child something. That sounds really dodgy. But they would give a child something to help settle them during the photo shoot, because let's be honest, I photographed enough kids in my time to know that they are less than cooperative. I mean, I wouldn't slip them like sedatives, but you know. Also, photographing a child when they're asleep would ensure a sharp and crisp professional photo. So where did this weird obsession start with Victorian post-mortem photography? I guess that you can argue that we as a culture, particularly pop culture, has always had this strange obsession with death, mirroring that of the Victorian era. I really do think it's just a morbid fascination with death and misinterpreting of evidence. And before art historians began to write more confidently about Victorian death photography, death denial itself was rampant throughout the 20th century. For example, in Secure the Shadow, scholar J. Ruby writes, "In spite of the increase in popular and scholarly work and the shift in public attitudes, the place of photography in our dealings with death has been virtually ignored by art historians, by those concerned with the material culture of death, and even by professionals in the field of grief counselling." And so the general public remained unaware of these publications. In 2002, the Thanatos Archive released around 2,000 portraits and made them internet accessible. These death portraits set the internet ablaze. Blogs and YouTube channels had a field day with these images. And soon things became even more crazy when they started suggesting that very much living subjects were actually dead. The internet is mostly to blame for this trend, let's be honest. Articles that are full of myths where it's clear research has not been done will only fuel the fire, thus leading to way more misinformed readers. And now it's become so ingrained in our culture that this was actually a thing that we refuse to look at the facts because it's not a thing. And then there's Pinterest, which of course, I think it's just a case of people creating a fake history and wanting to believe it. And yes, there are several sites debunking these myths. For every blog post about post-mortem photography, there is one there to correct the facts. In fact, just a couple of years ago, professional mortician Caitlin Doughty, aka Ask a Mortician, put up a video on her channel debunking the Victorian standing corpse myth. She's also one of my favourite YouTubers, which is why I am so interested in death. I am a self-confessed deathling. This woman is death positive. And as anticlimactic and disappointing as this conclusion is, not all is lost, because it is widely known that the Victorians did actually photograph their recently deceased. There is clearly no evidence to suggest the Victorians ever took part in those standing corpse shenanigans, but there is a lot of evidence to suggest they did photograph their recently deceased. In fact, it doesn't suggest that they did. They did photograph their dead, with photographers often trying to create portraits of them as if they were not dead, just sleeping. Sometimes these portraits were as simple as the person just lying in their coffin peacefully, surrounded by flowers. Other times the coffin was propped up. Children were made to look as though they were sleeping peacefully in their beds. Or a sibling would stand next to their deceased brother or sister's coffin. Sometimes they're simple, other times they're more elaborate and are clearly taking place at a funeral. You even see this practice in films. For example, in the movie Everlasting Moments, the main character is seen photographing the corpse of a recently deceased child. The reasons for this being the mother was too poor to have a photograph taken of her daughter while she was alive, and because the child died suddenly, now's better than never. The child isn't posed, sat up in a dress or a hat drinking tea or with a small dog by her side. It's nothing like that. It is very respectful. It's just her on her deathbed, arranged to look as if she is sleeping, and that's all it was. And it's not just the Victorians that did this. People today still photograph their dead. Funeral photography is rapidly becoming as popular as wedding photography. So that is it for this video. I would like to know what you think on this issue, whether you are convinced this was actually a thing, or if you've recently discovered this whole trend and you have no idea what I'm talking about. But either way, I would love to hear your thoughts, so just comment below and let me know what you think. If you want to look into this topic yourself, I have left several credible sources down in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. My uploads are every Wednesday and Saturday. You can also check out my social media pages. I will leave the links in the description down below. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!